Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Real ID and What You Need to Know. This is an especially important topic because this will be going into effect, as you all know, October 1st of 2020, so that you can guide your customers. I'm Judy Howard with ARC, and I'm really pleased to introduce our guest speaker today, who is Steve Yonkers. He's with the Department of Homeland Security, and he's got quite a title. He wears a few different hats. He's the Director of Biometrics, Credentialing, and then the Real ID program. His presentation deck is in the tool today, so if you want to download that and follow along as Steve goes through his slides. Also, I will ask you, definitely ask questions if you have any, and you can do that by going to the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, type in where there's questions and throughout the presentation, and at the end, we'll try to get to all of these. Steve's presentation won't take the full hour, of course, so we truly encourage questions because he's really the expert in this field and will be able to answer those. Everyone's phone will be muted, so the only way to ask those questions is to type them in. So Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Judy, and thanks everyone for having me here today. So just getting right into it, beginning with slide 2 here. So as I'm sure you've all heard, Real ID came out of recommendations from the 9/11 Commission. We looked how easy it was for the hijackers to get various forms of driver's licenses, identification cards, and just kind of looked at the different states and said, you know, there really was no minimum requirements, no minimum security requirements whatsoever for someone to get a driver's license. They basically said, you know, at a minimum, there should be this ground floor that everyone should meet so that the federal government could then trust these credentials as secure credentials. So with that, if you move to slide 3, Congress passed the Real ID Act in 2005, and it just required 2 main things. One, that for states to apply minimum security requirements for the issuance of driver's licenses and identification cards if they want federal agencies to accept those for official purposes. There's 3 official purposes under the Act, and those are accessing federal facilities, 2, entering nuclear power plants, probably doesn't apply to most of us, but then 3, the big one, of course, is boarding commercial aircraft. The Act covers the entire nation, all 50 states, DC, and the territories. And it authorized DHS to do a few things. One, to set the standards for compliance, which we do. Also to issue regulations. We have actually issued only 1 regulation. That was back in 2008, same regulation we're using today. It allows us to determine whether states are coming into compliance. There's actually 43 individual categories of compliance. There's probably over 100 individual requirements that the state has to meet in order to become compliant. The Act did allow the Secretary to provide extensions of time if needed for a state to come into compliance. Most states, they actually needed years to come into compliance because in most cases, they actually took the opportunity to really re-engineer the way they're doing driver's license issuance in their state. Oftentimes, they created brand new IT systems, rolled out new offices in the state, hired lots of new people, did training, all those different things. So as you can imagine, many states needed quite a bit of time to roll out their programs. The last thing it allowed us to do, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Steve. I'm just getting quite a few messages in that you sound a little muffled. And I don't know if you can get away from the phone or talk a little farther away from the phone or into the phone better.
Okay.
That's better.
What I can do.
Oh, that's better.
That's better.
That's better.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So let's see, following along. So it did allow us to make grants to the states. So Congress appropriated $263 million in fiscal years 9 through 11. They have not granted any additional funding for the states since then, but states can use a portion of their Homeland Security grants if they wish to do so for implementing Real ID. Next slide, please. So what does the Real ID Act require? So if you get into the nitty-gritty of it, it's really 3 main things. First, it requires the states to verify a person's identity, that they are who they say they are, to verify that they're lawfully present within the United States. It requires them to issue a secure credential, something that is tamper-resistant, couldn't be easily counterfeited. And then third, it requires the states to have a secure process, one that we can trust. So it begins with the employees themselves. So they've all undergone background investigations so that we don't have criminals working in the DMV, stealing your identity and things like that. That they have secure IT systems. The data is not going to be stolen or subject to hacking. That they're going to have secure facilities, infrastructure, all those different types of things. And then what did Real ID Act not do? So obviously it did not create a national ID card. Every state still issues its own driver's license identification card, just as it always has done. It didn't give DHS any authority to regulate the DMVs. The DMVs are still controlled by the states. They still run their operations, and all of the information they collect is stored in state systems. It does not go into any type of federal system, and we don't have any new access to that information. And the last thing is, it allows states to provide residents a choice of either getting a Real ID or a non-compliant card. Now, the non-compliant card, of course, is no good for Real ID purposes. It can't be used for boarding commercial aircraft or anything else. But certainly a non-compliant card can still be used for the obvious things like driving and voting and banking and, you know, all the various things for which you'd normally use a driver's license or ID card. Next slide, please. So this just shows you a few years ago where we were. So at that point, states had a long way to go. We only had 26 compliant states. We had many other states that either were working on their implementation programs, or you could see the ones in red weren't working at all. In fact, many of them had laws on the books preventing them from coming into Real ID compliance. And then if you go to the next slide, you can see this is where we are today. It's literally been a sea change across the United States. We have 51 compliant states. All states are issuing now except for Oregon and Oklahoma. So Oklahoma is going to begin the end of April, and Oregon beginning of July. They're going to be the last two to begin. The ones you see in blue, they are issuing, and they're just in the process of going through the compliance process. So that's why we show them as blue, meaning we're working with them to kind of finish things up. They hopefully will become green shortly. Next slide, please. So just a few things that we've done over the past year. So first of all, regarding residents of freely associated states, those are people from Palau, Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia. The United States has a compact with those states, and their residents are allowed to freely come and go to the United States. So that means they can come here to live and to work. And until recently, they could only get a temporary driver's license, which meant every year they had to come back to the DMV and get a new license. So Congress actually made a change in the law about a year ago, so they can now get full-term licenses like anyone else. The other thing I want to note is regarding marked non-compliant cards. So a question came up from some of the federal agencies of when they should stop accepting marked non-compliant cards. Because if you looked at the regulation, it was very clear that we would stop accepting legacy cards beginning October 1st, 2020, but really wasn't quite clear about what we're going to do about marked non-compliant cards. And as a result, DoD decided as part of its major security upgrade across all facilities that they actually stopped accepting marked non-compliant cards about a year ago. And they've been slowly rolling it out. So you may not even have heard anything about this. We haven't heard of any complaints at all of people having trouble getting onto bases and things with a marked non-compliant card. But just to let you know that they went ahead and stopped accepting them now. But for DHS purposes, we're doing everything on the same date. So on October 1st, 2020, we'll stop accepting legacy cards, we'll stop accepting marked non-compliant cards, and then we'll only accept either Real ID compliant cards or acceptable alternatives like a passport. The third item I want to note here is regarding Real ID adoption rates. So last summer we did a quick kind of pulse check, and we just asked, where are the states in terms of issuing Real IDs? And what we found at that time was about 67 million Real IDs issued, representing about 27% of all licenses out there. And then late in the fall, we went back to the states and said, hey, could you give us that information again? And if possible, could you give it to us on a monthly basis? And so now we're at a point where there's over 95 million Real IDs that have been issued, and adoption rate is over 34%. And we're seeing that tick up, as you can imagine, every month. The fourth item I want to note is regarding streamlining the Roadie issuance process. So many states came back to us, as well as many applicants, and said, you know, it's actually really hard finding all these different documents. I have to find my Social Security card. I got to figure out what to do with my birth certificate. I may not have seen that thing in many years. And getting those things together, bringing them into the DMV, it can actually take quite a bit of time and quite a bit of an effort. So they said, you know, hey, it's 2020. It's been a lot of years since the law was passed. Isn't there some things we could do to maybe electronically submit documents or find other ways to make it easier for people to get a real ID? And so we kind of took that to heart and said, you know, you're right. There's definitely some things we should be able to do. So we issued a request for information in this past November. It closed on December 9th. We received 69 submissions, representing, I'm going to say, over 100 individual proposals. And so we're currently evaluating those. We actually, pretty early on, realized it was something we could implement immediately. This just happened in the past week. We issued information, or I should say guidance, to all states, letting them know that they could actually start electronically receiving documents now. They could do it immediately and perform a triage. So they could take a look at the documents and then let the person know whether they have the correct documents or not. Because oftentimes you'll hear people say, I went in, I brought what I thought were all the correct documents, and then I was told they weren't the right things. Then I came in again, and the same thing, I didn't quite have everything assembled. So this would be an opportunity for people to submit things electronically in advance, securely, so they couldn't be stolen or be subject to identity theft, and have the state say, yep, you have the right documents, now come on in, and hopefully provide an appointment for that person so they can get in and out as quickly as possible. Now, we're still looking at other proposals, and we anticipate working with either internally with our Office of Management Budget or with Congress as necessary to implement other hopefully viable proposals. The last thing I just want to note is regarding mobile driver's licenses. So you may have said, hey, what are these things? I've heard about these. I think maybe I heard a couple states might be issuing these things. So the idea here is that after you get your physical driver's license and it's stored in your wallet or back pocket, wherever you keep it, you would then have an electronic version on, say, your phone. So therefore, when you went to, say, a TSA checkpoint in the future, in addition to having your boarding pass on your iPhone, you could also have your driver's license information on your iPhone. It's not a photograph of your driver's license. It's actually the information from your record at the state on your iPhone. And then that would allow TSA or any other, say, vendor checking your ID to actually check back with the state, actually check back against your record to confirm you are who you say you are and you are the valid holder of that license. So again, this is not directly tied to Real ID. It has no relationship to the October 1st, 2020 deadline. It's something we see in years in the future to come, but it's something we're very excited about. We think that's another advantage for people to be able to easily present their driver's license information. Next slide, please. So this is just to show you that we've actually been implementing Real ID over many years now. So going back to 2014, we began at DHS headquarters. We expanded to other federal facilities. And then finally, we're coming to boarding commercial aircraft, as you can see, October 1st, 2020. So right now, for states that are compliant or have an extension, we're not enforcing any of these right now. So all 4 of these phases will be introduced on October 1st, 2020. Now, obviously, the federal facilities have been prepared for some time, and there was times in the past that actually some states were subject to enforcement. But as of right now, as you could tell from that last map I showed, no states are subject to enforcement. So so at least for DHS purposes, I should say, you know, we continue to accept those legacy cards, those marked non-compliant cards, and then there'll only be Real IDs or acceptable alternatives come October 1st, 2020. Next slide, please. So still we get the question, well, what happens though? What if I show up on October 1st, 2020, and I don't have a Real ID or an acceptable alternative? And so unfortunately, the straight answer is you're not going to be able to fly because you're not going to be able to get through the security checkpoint. And unless you left that ID at home, you can run home and get it and bring it back in time, we're probably going to miss our flights. So that's why I just want to make it as crystal clear as possible that people are going to need to be prepared for October 1st, 2020. Next slide, please. So of course, many people say, well, what are the acceptable alternatives? Do I actually need to have a real ID? The answer is no, you don't. Instead, you could get a U.S. passport, a passport card. Certain states offer enhanced driver's licenses. Many people have other types of cards. Some people who work for the government may have a PIV card. Some people have federally recognized tribal issued photo IDs, which are also acceptable. These are technically not real ID compliant. They're acceptable alternatives that the federal agencies allow for people to pass through a security checkpoint. And all of these are available. So short answer, do I need a real ID? No, you don't, as long as you have all these other cards. Next slide, please. So big question is, so what are we doing to make sure everyone is aware and prepared for the deadline? So really, it first begins with the states. This is a state program. In essence, it's states that are issuing the driver's licenses and identification cards. It's their residents that are affected, and they have the most access to their residents. And as you can tell, they're doing the majority of activities, everything from pushing information on websites, doing social media blasts, a variety of different things you've probably seen depending on what state you live in. And of course, the states that just started issuing the last couple of years probably have the largest and most comprehensive real ID advertising campaigns. Now, on the federal government side, with TSA, we've been doing a variety of things. So they have signage and videos. They've been doing verbal reminders now. So hopefully, if you flew recently and didn't have a real ID or an acceptable alternative, hopefully the TSO said, hey, I noticed you don't have the right card. It's good for today, but it's not going to be good come October 1st, 2020. Just a reminder to be prepared for that deadline. And then for the travel industry, we've been working with every airline, every airport, and I can tell you they've been doing a lot of different things. The airlines in particular are rolling out their campaigns now. You may have seen some things already in the fall from some of the airlines, but you're going to see things from every airline starting almost immediately. And then the airports are getting involved as well. Many airports are actually getting together with the state agencies to bring the states into the airports to do things that are away from the TSA security checkpoint, and put them in other places where people are more relaxed, just waiting for their flight, and more likely to have time to get more information about real ID. In some cases, states are actually bringing their licensing applications into the airport so people can actually get their real ID while they're waiting for their flight. Next slide, please. So last slide, just to show for more information. So we actually have two websites now. We have the main DHS website that I run that has everything you ever want to know about real ID. We have the law up there, the regulation, FAQs, all kinds of different things. And then TSA has their own website as well, which is more focused. They have a real ID marketing toolkit available, and you can see these are a few examples of things they have. So examples of signage and fact sheets and bookmarks, things like that. And then finally, for more information, you can give this out to the public. This is realid@hq.dhs.gov. We get about 150 inquiries a week. They're growing almost every week now. And we can answer basic questions, but I should note that most questions that people have, we're usually directing them back to their state DMV because they're specific to what their DMV requires. One thing I didn't note during my presentation is that Real ID only provides minimum security requirements. The states can add additional security requirements if they wish to do so. And in fact, most states have more stringent requirements than Real ID even requires. So people say, well, why is it different from state to state? That's the reason, because some states have done more than what Real ID requires as a minimum. And with that, I'll turn it back to Judy for any questions.
Yeah, hi, Steve. Some of the questions that have come in, and before we get started with them, I know a lot of people still said it was a little muffled and hard to hear, and I apologize for that. We will be having you back, Steve, later this spring, early summer for another webinar, and we'll try to get that sound fixed. This will be a recorded session, so for those that couldn't hear it well, we will have it downloaded on our ARC website under training, webinars on demand. Also, I'll be sending out an email with a thank you next week, and the recording will be attached. And you can also follow along, as I said in the beginning, there is the presentation deck that's under handouts that you can download. So take a look at that, and Steve does have his contact information here if you have more specific questions. But as you can tell, this is a really important topic that Steve is going over, because if your customers don't have this, they could get denied boarding, right, Steve, at the airport on October 1. So very important. One of the big questions, Steve, here that seems to be coming out, there's quite a few actually, is what about children under 18 years old? What do they need to do? Obviously, they may or may not have a passport. They won't have a driver's license. What credentials do they need?
They don't need anything. If you're under 18, you don't require anything. Your parent or guardian will have their documentation, and that's all they need.
Oh, okay. So anyone 18 or under, nothing. Or is it 18 and up? How is it? Or is it?
Well, just like right now, so if I'm traveling with my daughter does not require to have an ID. I have to have an ID as her guardian.
Okay. So anyone, is it under 18, Steve, or 18?
Yeah, under 18. Right. When you become an adult, you have to have identification, which is age 18.
Yep, got it. Perfect. Just want to make that clear, because there were a lot of questions on that. So thank you. And then let's see, it says, what are the requirements for minors? I'm just going through the questions, and a lot of them is about the minors. Let's see here. This one is slide 10 mentioned October 1st, acceptable form of ID, fly without. Let's see, the Steve think travel agents will need to enter the passenger ID. Oh, okay, Steve. Do you think travel agents will need to enter the passenger's ID in the reservation line? We currently do their TSA information. So is it anything that an agent would need to enter in when making a reservation on the ticket?
I don't think so.
Okay, it really is all happening at the airport, correct? When they're showing identification.
Right. My understanding is that the airlines are adding to the reservation system, and hopefully Travelocity, Expedia, and the others are doing this as well, is adding warnings and banners, just reminding people they need to have real ID. I don't think there's any way through the reservation system you'd know that the person had a real ID or an acceptable alternative. I guess maybe enough they had a passport if you were putting your passport information in.
Okay. Let's see here. There's, again, a lot of questions coming in. Need to enter passport ID. Just bear with me, everyone. I'm just reading through these.
Sure.
I said I was trying to take a picture of what is acceptable, what's in. I saw global entry, but what about TSA pre-check?
So pre-check, unfortunately, is not an acceptable alternative because there's no ID card associated with it.
But global entry is.
Right. So for global entry, you would produce your global entry card. For TSA pre-check, you'd still have to produce your driver's license or some other identification.
Okay. Stephen, you had said earlier in the presentation there were acceptable forms of identification, but those may be going away, and it will really only be passport and real ID. Well,
oh no,
about that. What was? Can you just repeat what that was about?
Right. So I showed the list of acceptable identification, and that's still acceptable. All those things are acceptable.
It was the slide before that, I think, where it had something about accreditation mark or something. What? I think it was the slide before. It had this one right here, where it had acceptable acceptance of marked non-compliant cards.
Right, meaning we'll no longer accept non-compliant cards.
Okay.
Come the deadline.
Okay.
Right, so think of it this way. Most states offer a choice. You either go in the DMV and get a real ID, or you get a marked non-compliant card. Marked non-compliant card means it doesn't have the star, and it probably has something on it that says, like, not for official purposes, not for real ID, or something to that effect.
Okay. Great. Someone just wanted to.
Yeah. Right. Yes, that's what it means.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let's see. Oh, this, I guess, is just a comment. In the state of New York, there's just really long license lines for licenses being given because of like, undocumented folks. Is there like Real ID express lines where if someone already has a license, they can just go show all their credentials to get their Real ID, or do they have to like kind of queue up with everybody else?
I assume every state determines how they're going to do that. I don't know if there's any separation for that. When I went to my DMV, I was in a line for driver's license renewal. So I don't think there's any separation on that.
Okay. So no express lines.
Well, right. I don't know. And like again, this is states run these things, so it's up to them.
Okay. So the people really should go to their state and look at what the what specifically is needed, Steve, right?
Absolutely, because like I said, there's great differences from state to state of what they require.
Okay. Oh, here's
in fact, if you go to Maryland, just to give you an example, if you go to Maryland's website, they give a tutorial, and at the end of the tutorial, you get a bonus because you get an appointment for your Real ID.
Oh, wow. So would you have to come back? Would a person have to go back to do that? To do the Real ID?
Before you go to the DMV. You would go on to their website and go to the tutorial.
Oh, got it. Okay.
They explain what documents to bring.
Okay. That's helpful. That's really helpful. So really the main message is check, have your customers check by state.
Right,
here's something.
exactly.
Oh, great. Let me just read this. We've been told by TSA that the paper temporary license would not be accepted even if they qualified for Real ID. Many states use central insurance for licensing, and therefore the actual credential is mailed. The only thing our traveler has is a paper temporary license. Does that, Steve, do you need me to repeat that, or is that they need to check with their state?
So I think the issue there is, like, for example, most of the states are using central issuance for their Real ID. So usually you go into the DMV, you complete the paperwork, and then you leave with probably your same ID now voided, and then some type of piece of paper that basically is driving authorization. So generally, that's not going to be sufficient for boarding an airplane, which is why you can't wait. People should not wait until the last week before October 1st to get their Real ID because they may not have one come October 1st. It can take states, generally it takes states about 5 days on average, I think, to get the ID mailed out.
Oh, wow.
I've heard some states it could take, closer to 2 weeks. So that's why we're telling people don't wait, get the Real ID today.
Yeah, because truly, depending on mail situations, could take probably 10 business days if your mail is slow or something. If it's coming in the mail, hopefully it wouldn't, but I would say people should really try to have them by September 1 or get them now. Yeah. And they can,
right,
go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, because the other thing is I'm hearing in some states, particularly ones that have appointments, their appointments are already filling up.
Oh, wow. So you may not even,
right.
like say if you even wait to August, you may not even be able to get an appointment in August or September in enough time to qualify for your Real ID.
Well, I've heard in some states, because it's appointments are filling up so quickly, say in their city or county, they're having to go to other cities or counties in the state.
Okay. And I think the other important message is here, the October 1st deadline is solely really important if people are traveling that day or close to it. If you have customers that aren't or if people are not traveling or plan to travel, they can wait they shouldn't wait, but they could in theory, right? This is really only super important for those travelers, correct?
Right, and it's also why we advise people, if they're concerned at all about getting a Real ID in time, then they may want to get an acceptable alternative like a passport or passport card.
Okay, and then they could because you can, instead of even doing this, if they can't do it in time, they can always just use a passport, right, or passport card.
Exactly. And the Department of State right now has lots of availability for passports and passport cards, but just like everyone else, they're going to get really busy come spring.
Okay. So yeah, just good to keep all of these dates in mind because time is really pedaling along because we're already at the end of February. This is a good question. Is there a list of airports that will have the option to obtain the Real ID compliance licenses on site that people can direct their travelers to take a look at?
I've only heard of it occasionally happening. I heard New York. I think it's more like events that they'll have. So like New York had an event at the airport. I think state of Washington had an event at the airport. So I'm not aware of anyone who's like has full-time DMV operations in an airport.
Okay. So probably don't really count on being able to do it at the airport, right?
Right. I mean, I think it's as much of a marketing opportunity as anything else. You know, it's not meant to get in huge populations.
Okay. Steve, here's a question. Wait, where'd it go? Yeah, you can maybe repeat this just to make sure it's all clear. Is there one specific identifier that all Real IDs from every state will have?
Yeah, they have a star, generally up in the upper right-hand corner. Alabama's the exception. Theirs is in the upper left-hand corner, although I've heard their newest cards are now moved it to the upper right-hand corner because it's everyone else had in the upper right-hand corner. But yeah, you do look for the star. If it doesn't have a star, it's not a Real ID. It won't be accepted.
And I think those stars could be gold or black or clear, or as long as it's a star.
Right. In some cases, California placed it within their state animal. Maine placed it within an outline of the state. In hindsight, maybe we should not have approved so many different variations, but there's at least 7 different variations out there. They're all approved, but they all focus on having a star. Non-compliant cards never have a star.
Okay, of any color type. Okay.
Correct.
Here's another.
Correct.
Okay. I know because I'm from the state of Delaware and we had a gold star, and now I think it's gone to clear when I renewed my license just recently. Here's another question. I live in Washington State and occasionally ask the TSA agents about my enhanced driver's license. The responses are mixed. How do we know for sure that a Washington State enhanced ID 100% of the time will be accepted?
It is accepted now 100% of the time. It will always be accepted 100% of the time.
Okay.
And
even
if the
after
person, I would say if you ever run in a situation where the officer is not accepting your ID, ask to see a supervisor. If the supervisor doesn't help, ask to see a manager. Because obviously they're hiring people all the time. This person may be brand new and may be making a mistake.
Okay, good. That's good information. Here, this is a question, I think we just talked about it a little while ago, but is there any way to avoid spending an entire day in line? That might be something. Would you recommend, Steve, again, going to your state DMV, going to the website and seeing what their recommendations are for getting the Real ID?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, you know, the most common issue we hear now is regarding name changes. So people have changed their names, even if you may not have thought you changed your name, but if you go by a nickname, if your nickname is on your current driver's license and it's different from what's on your birth certificate, that's going to be a problem. And you're going to have to show how you got from that name to your current name. Why? Because we're trying to prevent identity theft. So the states are the ones that ultimately determine what evidence they will accept. We have nothing to do with that from the federal government perspective. It's all state requirements. So in advance, if there's any differences in your name from one of your source documents to another, that's where you want to contact your driver's license agency. It may tell you right on their website. It often does. If you're still unclear, you know, we direct people to contact the driver's license agency and find out before they show up if they might need, you know, information from the courts. You know, they may have to go back and get a Social Security card updated. I mean, there's different things that a person may have to do to reconcile all of that.
good information. Thank you, Steve. This is another question. It says, the additional alternative forms of ID needed to travel are for domestic travel only, correct? And that's correct, right, Steve?
Correct. Correct. Yes. Correct.
You cannot use a passport card to fly internationally. It still must be a passport, because passport and passport book, the book has just more pages, I think. Our global entry cards accepted as an entry card. So I think they're saying it's only these alternative forms of IDs are only good for domestic travel, except of course your passport you would use, or your passport book you would use internationally. Passport card, you can't fly internationally on that, Steve, can you, or can you?
You cannot. Passport card was formed under what's called the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative, and it's just for Canada, Mexico, and I think the Caribbean.
Okay. So that would then be accepted in those destinations. Okay. And then also, are global entry cards accepted as an entry card? Yes, for domestic travel, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Right. I guess the common thing to say is just if it's international travel, then you're going to be using your passport.
Yep. Yeah, good way to put it, easier. Let's see, is the public able to sign up for Real ID online at this point, or only submit documents for verification? There's no way they can.
Not right now, no. I mean, and even with the new change that we made, it's still up to states whether they wish to adopt it or not. I think California is already using it, and we'll add the additional parts. Unknown how many other states will adopt it, but so, yeah, once you prepare that, they're going to have to assemble their physical documents and bring them in person to the DMV.
Okay. And then again, check every state because it's different. Requirements are different. Correct?
That's correct.
This question, okay, so we addressed the issue if you're 18, your child is under 18, they don't need anything. What if their child is 18 years old but lives at home? What do they need to do? They're an adult, so it'd be the same as everyone else.
Get an ID. They can get. If you're 18, you should have identification, no matter where you live.
Okay.
They don't have to get a driver's license. They can get an identification card, and that can be Real ID compliant.
Yep. And they would need that they'd need that to travel today, wouldn't they, Steve?
They would, yeah. So I mean, nothing changes with Real ID from that perspective.
Okay. Let's see here. There's quite a few questions. Let me keep going through. If you want to get a compliant driver's license and already have a passport, you can take that passport to the tag office to get the new driver's license, or they will need other documentation. Again, I think it's state by state, correct?
No, actually, so let me explain how this works. So
okay.
Essentially, if you have generally you need your birth certificate, but if you have a passport, you can use that to serve two functions, as your identity document, verifying your identity, and also verifying your lawful status, in this case, the United States. But you're still going to need Social Security card. You can still need proofs of address.
Okay. And is a Social Security card?
It makes the process faster.
Okay. And does it have to be an actual Social Security card, or can it be a document with your Social Security number on it?
There's 5 different forms allowed. One is Social Security card. W-2 is also acceptable. A pay stub with your Social Security number on it. One thing to keep in mind, it has to be your full Social Security number, not just say the last 4 or 5 digits.
Okay, but it has to be some sort of authentic or official thing that has your full number on it.
Correct, because what the DMV has to do 2 things. One, authenticate that document as being genuine and not fake. And then they actually are going to run that number against Social Security's system called Solve.
Okay. No, these are all really good questions, so everyone keep asking them. This one is, they say that some approved licenses have stars on them. I have an enhanced license, but no stars. Is it still a real ID because it states that it's enhanced?
So enhanced, it does not mean real ID. There are two different types of cards under two different programs under two different congressional authorities entirely. But enhanced driver's licenses, EDLs for short, are acceptable alternatives and they'll always be accepted. They don't have stars except for, I think Michigan started adding a star to theirs. So again, we're accepting the star, but EDL generally acceptable alternative will always be good to go.
Oh, okay. So if, for the most part, an enhanced license would be good.
And not for the most part, it's always good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Steve.
100% of the time. Yeah, if you have an EDL, you don't need anything else.
Okay, good. That's, I think, important to know. Let's see. What if a minor is traveling alone? What would they need? If they're not,
So my understanding is minors still require a parent or guardian in order to set up the trip. And that person's identification will be checked before the person is allowed to proceed, before the minor is allowed to proceed. So it would no minor can just show up at an airport and buy a ticket and fly, for example.
The minor could have a ticket, but whoever is responsible for that child would need to be at the airport with them to show their credentials.
Yeah, it gets worked out with both TSA and the airline.
Okay.
There's a whole procedure that every airline follows for that.
Okay. So it's important to know what's expected.
Right, but for people who are having their minors travel, it's going to be no change in the procedure.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of questions on that one, minors traveling alone. This one's a different question. In my industry, we work with ill patients who are clinical trials. Many are last-minute acceptance into the study, and they then travel soon. Thereafter not giving them enough time to get the real ID. Are there emergency real IDs issued? Like last-minute emergency passports. Like
that would be up to the state if they provide any type of service like that.
Okay. So that would be something that if the clinic is doing these clinical trials, they may want to take a look at where the state for the person is coming from potentially and help them get what they need or understand what they need.
Yeah. Right. We've never heard from any of these types of places, but if there's any, we'd be happy to talk to them if they need information.
Okay. Okay. This is a different variation on the minors traveling alone. What about students who undertake school groups? So in this group, they're all minors.
It's all the same. It's all the same. It's all the same. Minors cannot travel without the permission of their guardian or parents. And there's a whole process for that.
And that's usually that can be found also in the airlines, right? Rules.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any issues anyone's having. If you're aware of current issues with minors being able to travel, let me know. I'd be happy to check in with TSA.
Yeah. Okay, that'd be helpful. And everyone, obviously you can see Steve's information on the screen. And I would say for any issues or questions that you have as we move forward, Steve, to reach out to you, correct? Or at the realid@hq.dhs.gov.
Yeah, I would say if one of the agents have questions, obviously they can get hold of me through you, Judy, or me directly through my email address. The one I have at the last slide is really more of a general public one. You don't need to use that. You can come directly to me for any questions.
Okay, great. Because I think
the real ID one, yeah, because there's definitely a backlog in getting back to those that come in the main real ID address. So I don't want to make anybody wait. If you have a question, just contact me directly.
Okay, that's very helpful. Because I'm assuming as we get closer, to the summertime, I'm sure there'll be more questions that pop up because there's just so many nuances just by the questions being asked here this afternoon. There's lots of different variations of scenarios. Sure. Decal driver's license. Hang on, I'm just scrolling through. There's many, and Steve, I'll get these questions to you as well.
Okay.
Let me see here. Handouts, again, can be found on the control panel, right-hand side where it says handouts, and you should be able to download those. If not, please email me at jhoward@arcorp.com, and I'll be happy to just let me know you want the presentation. I'll send it. Okay. If a client has a passport card as a real ID needed, I think we've clarified that. For domestic travel, the passport card would work, correct? In lieu of real ID.
Correct. That's right.
Okay, hang on one second. There's just a lot to scroll through. What's this one? Kentucky Transportation Cabinet is advising the temporary paper ID with the circled star along with your old driver's license will be valid for travel into the new driver's license with the star is received. Is that true? Will this affect anyone in an emergency trap? Okay, so what it's saying, this is specific to Kentucky. So Steve, you may not know this off the top of your head. So they may need to go to the state website. Kentucky Transportation Cabinet is advising temporary paper ID with a circled star along with old driver's license will be valid for travel until the new driver's license with a star is received. I don't think, is that true after
they mean
October?
Right, they mean, yeah, they mean right now, right?
I would say now it is, but after October 1, probably not, correct?
I wouldn't bet on that.
Yeah. This will affect anyone in emergency travel situation who is not prepared in advance for the Real ID license. I would say they would need to really look at the state of Kentucky, but it sounds like if it's a paper ID after October 1 without, you know what I mean, with just a star circled, that's not the real license, it sounds like it might not work, right?
Well, I mean, one thing to keep in mind is there's nothing TSA could do with a paper license because it's not going to be Real ID compliant. There's no way for paper to be Real ID compliant.
Okay. And I think one of the themes here as well, if in case of emergencies, and there is no, the traveling person doesn't have any of those other forms of ID, they don't have a real ID, would that be like a state by state, for them to travel, or they just will not be able to travel? And then
well, again, I mean, TSA, I mean, I guess the question is there a rare exception where TSA may be able to do something to try to verify the person's identity otherwise?
Yeah, and they didn't have the other, it would be on a case-by-case basis. In other words,
yeah,
Steve?
I wouldn't want to rely on that in any way.
Okay. Is there, can you just?
Go ahead.
Oh, nope, go ahead, Steve.
No, I was just saying, I wouldn't rely on TSA being able to provide an exception for a rare situation. I'm sure they would try to do something if it was possible, but obviously, with the large numbers expected, there's no way they're going to be able to handle, a great deal of exceptions.
Okay. So good to be prepared in advance. Everyone should be. In this one, can you describe the difference between an enhanced driver's license and a real ID?
Sure. So like I said, they're under completely different congressional authorities. Real ID has nothing to do with enhanced driver's licenses. Real ID can be given to people who are both U.S. citizens and lawfully present. Enhanced driver's licenses can only be given to U.S. citizens. So that's one big difference. The cards are very different. The enhanced driver's license actually has a microchip in it, driver's licenses do not. If you have an EDL, you're actually giving your information to the federal government, because the whole point of an EDL is to act as a border crossing card. It's the whole reason for its existence. And it's why it's only 5 states issue them, and they're all border states, because the whole point of it is you are getting a special driver's license where you give your information over to Customs and Border Protection, so that when you then are returning to the country, they pull up your information on the screen and can verify you are who you say you are, that you are a U.S. citizen, and more quickly get you back into the country. That's the sole purpose for EDL.
Okay. Thank you, Steve, for that
Sure.
explanation. Where is the list of required documents for motor vehicles? That would be just on the state Department of Motor Vehicles website, correct?
Right. You mean in terms of what they require? Absolutely.
Yep.
Like a perfect question is, what are the 2 proofs of address? Every state has a different list of what they accept.
And Steve, you may have covered this, but there's again a handful of these questions still. For the children that are 18 and older, still living at home, and one of the criteria is if there is, they need proof of address, but they don't have any.
Right.
What is it?
Right.
Always
so in that
address
case,
required, or?
So generally what most states do in that situation is they allow the parents to vouch that the minor lives there. And so they usually actually have the parent provide a letter attesting to that.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Must be a lot of children living at home.
What was that?
I said, it sounds like there's a lot of children living at home. Making me a little worried. My daughter's only 13, but she's welcome to live at home if she wants.
Yeah, that's good. Let's see. I understood if there are 17, tell me without a gun, you don't need anything. What if there are 17, tell me that. We just talked about that. Again, I just want to apologize for the audio today. Seems to be a lot of questions on that. Hang on, there's Steve, a lot of questions. Oh, this is, I think, one that's important to address. For domestic travel, is an expired passport still okay? Of course, you can't leave the country with an out-of-date passport, even though the passport is out of date. It still has all the background information. Is there a time frame that an expired passport would work, like for 6 months or a year after it's expired, or not? It would not be able to be used domestically in place of the Real ID at all. Can you talk about that?
I'm unsure of the passport. I think generally right now your driver's license could be expired for up to a year. That happened. It happened to me recently. Well, last August when I was renewing my license, the TSA officer told me that I could have used it for up to a year after. I'm not exactly sure what the situation is going to be come October 1st with expired licenses. Obviously, at this point, you could have a Real ID, I guess, that could become expired. Some states have been issuing since 2011. So I could take that question back to TSA regarding expired Real ID licenses. Obviously, if it's a legacy license, it wouldn't be accepted no matter what, expired or otherwise.
Yeah, and the one about the passport as well. Not just the license, but the passport. If an expired passport, if there's, like the license you're saying, is there a time period where that would still be acceptable domestically?
I'm off the top of my head without saying officially, there probably is some amount of time that they would continue to accept an expired passport, but you can't get back in the country with an expired passport, so I'm not sure that's a great idea.
Right, exactly. But they could potentially go from California to New York, potentially, and that would be something. Steve, can you take that back as a action item too? Yeah,
we'll have to take that back to the Department of State.
Yeah, because I think that's a good one. That's a really good question.
Right.
Let me just read here. Hang on, I'm just scrolling down, so bear with me. Which indicates space for Real ID. Minor traveling. To clarify, minor traveling along with his or her guardian, are there check the child in? Does the guardian? Oh, this is a good one. I don't know if we've verified this. I know we talked a lot about the minor, the guardian checking them in. So does the guardian then have to have a real ID?
Yeah.
They're dropping the child off, the child goes, the guardian has to have
Oh,
real ID.
absolutely. Right.
Okay.
Whoever is providing identity is going to have compliant identification.
Right. Whether it's the real ID or one of the other acceptable forms of identification.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Because otherwise that would be a loophole.
Okay. Direct mail. What if a passenger loses their ID when they're on a trip?
That definitely happens. So TSA does have an identity verification call center specifically for that type of issue. But I can tell you that it's scaled at maybe, I think they can handle maybe 800 calls a day. It's actually a very labor-intensive process at the airport. They pull you out of line, and you actually have to borrow like someone's supervisor's phone. They make the call, and then you have to go through like a knowledge-based authentication, a very lengthy process. So that will continue to exist in its current form for someone who truly has just forgotten or lost their real ID, but they're not scaling it up. So someone could wait a very long time, perhaps, before they could even use the process.
True. Good. Thank you, Steve. One of the things, Steve, you had said people can contact you directly. Your contact information, can you provide that?
Yeah, so it's the same email that we've been using. So it's Steve, STVE, Yonkers, YONKERS, at hq.dhs.gov.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. And that number again is, that email again is steve.yonkers at hq.dhs.gov. And Steve, you prefer email, not a phone call?
Judy, there's a dot after the HQ, so it's hq.dhs.gov.
Yep, thank you, because I do have a dot. I didn't say it. Yeah, so hq.dhs.gov. And Steve, you prefer an email, not a phone call, right?
Well, I'm always available by email.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, because that's just easy for you to look at.
Right, for mobile purposes.
Yep. Let me just, there's a few more here. There's a lot of questions, Steve, and I will send these to you because you may want to enhance your Q&A from any of these questions.
Okay.
Let's see here. Should we recommend clients take passports for those under 18 to prepare for real ID? This one is, I guess, I'm not sure. Should we recommend to clients to get passports for those under 18 to be prepared for real ID? Is that, do you think, necessary?
Meaning, so when they become 18, they're already prepared?
Yeah, I think that's the question. But then they would have their passport, so they could use that.
Sure. I mean, probably. We'll say it's never a bad idea to have a passport.
Yeah, because the passport.
Might not appreciate me telling everyone to get a passport, but if someone wants one, by all means, they should get one.
I think this is an interesting question, Steve. So I know I have my, we have a driver's license. This question's coming up a few times. So the real ID wouldn't expire on your valid driver's license. It would be if the driver's license was going to expire, then your real ID would expire with your driver's license if you didn't renew it, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's not like the real ID expires before the driver's license. It kind of goes hand in hand, right?
Well, and you only have to provide the information once for life.
Oh, for life.
So you would once you submit your real ID information, you're good. You only have to come in, I think, back every 16 years for a new photo.
Okay, great. Perfect. That's good to know. So you only need the credentials once, you get it, and if you stay in the same state, you can just renew with your Real ID.
That's exactly right.
Okay, great. And we're at our kind of our end of our time today, Steve. Most of all, I want to thank everyone that took the time to spend with us today on the call. Like I said, you can download the handout if anyone can't and needs it, jhoward.artcorp.com. Please reach out to Steve because he does have all the answers, steve.yonkers@hq.dhs.gov. I can always get to him as well. Here is the website. I think that's important. It's up on the screen. But this is an important topic, and the main thing is you really don't want your customers to get caught on October 1. Please reach out. Please join us. We have a fraud webinar coming up on March 3rd. Steve, you'll be back with us again, late spring, early summer. So everyone watch out for that. And of course, if there's ever any topics for webinars, you can email me those as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Steve, thank you very much for the time you've spent with us today, too.
You're welcome. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.